Welcome to the Hopkinton Public Library. My name is Danielle Cook. I'm an Adult Services Librarian, and I'm very pleased tonight to introduce you to Cherie Tripp, who is a health coach. She will be talking to us about brain health and how you can improve your brain.
Awesome. Thank
Welcome,
you,
Cherie.
Danielle.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming and listening tonight. As Danielle said, my name is Cherie, and I actually grew up here in Hopkinton, so I am thrilled to be here tonight. I actually grew up with my grandparents 2 houses down from me. So as you can imagine, I spent a lot of my childhood walking between the 2 houses and being able to spend a lot of time with them. They babysat my sister and I, and it was just a really great way to grow up. And as I got older, college age or so, I was sitting in my house one day, and the way my house is set up is if you sit on the couch, you can look right out the window and you can see up the street to my grandparents' house. And I was sitting there and I saw my grandmother come out to check the mail, which was nothing unusual about that. But then not very long after, 10 minutes or so, I saw her come back out to check it again, which was a little odd. And then a little more time went by, saw her come out again, and this happened a few more times. So I started to kind of have a red flag that something might not be right. Unfortunately, it ended up that we had to place her in a local nursing home in the Alzheimer's unit for her safety, where she ended up spending the rest of her days until she passed away, not really knowing who she was or who any of us were either. So now I am on a mission to help everyone with their brain health and to be proactive so that what my grandmother went through doesn't happen to you or any of your family. So let's jump into the presentation. Before I get too far in, before I forget, I have to put my little lawyer hat on and read my disclaimer. I'm going to read it so that I don't miss anything. So I'm not acting in the capacity of a doctor, psychologist, or other licensed or registered professional, and anything that I talk about is not meant to take the place of advice by these professionals. You should discuss any dietary changes or potential dietary supplement use with your doctor and should not discontinue any prescription medications without consulting your doctor as well. So now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into our goals for this presentation tonight. So we're going to talk about how brains run the world. And give you kind of a new perspective on that. We are going to talk about SPECT scans, and so those stand for single photon emission computed tomography. Quite a mouthful. We will just call them SPECT scans from here on out. And then finally, the 7 principles to know that you can change your brain and your life. And I also want to mention too that a lot of what I'll be talking about tonight, you'll hear me talk about Dr. Daniel Amen. And I went through his programs and became a licensed brain trainer. And he has a number of books out as well. I believe here in Hopkinton, there's the ebooks available, but there is hard copies at other libraries that you can get sent here if after tonight you're interested in looking into him a little bit more. So let's go ahead here. Okay, so brains run the world. They really do when you stop and think about it. So let's look at some examples. They run the stock market. They run the local market. They run huge corporations. And they run smaller corporations as well. They run schools. This is actually a picture of a school in Vancouver that has implemented one of Dr. Amen's programs. It's called Thrive by 25. And it's found that the children that go through this program have lower levels of depression, lower alcohol and drug nicotine use, and higher self-esteem. So really great results from it. And that is Dr. Amen in the front in the light blue shirt. They also, brains run churches. They run families. And I think most importantly, they run you as well. So those are just some ways that you might not have thought about in the past on how your brain is really involved in your day-to-day life and the world. But most people rarely think about their brain, which can be a huge mistake. Because success in anything you do starts with your brain and how you're feeling. We'll see some examples. You could think of it as your competitive advantage or disadvantage is the physical functioning of your brain. All right, so here are those SPECT scans that I mentioned earlier. What SPECT scans tell us is the health of our brain and the activity. So there's two different views. We have the surface view and the active view. And this is if we went and got a scan today, this is what we want to see, what our brains look like. For the surface view, you can see that it's very symmetrical. And for the active view, so the blue is normal activity. And then the red is like a higher level, can almost sometimes be too much activity. In the normal brain, you're going to find some red in the back of your brain. That's the cerebellum. That's where a majority of the neurons are. So it's not uncommon to see the red down the bottom, but mostly blue everywhere else for the normal activity. So this is our goal. This is what we want to see. And we're going to look at some examples of different diagnoses and see the difference. So the first one we're going to look at is someone that has Alzheimer's, what their scan might look like. Okay, so here you can clearly see the difference between the healthy scan and someone with Alzheimer's. Now with Alzheimer's, it's found that changes to the brain can start 20 years before any symptoms. So in my grandmother's case, right, like her brain probably started to change decades before I noticed her going to the mailbox that day. So it's definitely not a disease where you want to think, oh, I will pay attention and take my health more seriously once I get it, because then you're trying to battle 20 years of changes. So we really want to be as proactive as possible. Here is someone with a traumatic brain injury. So again, you can see the difference in the scans. With brain injuries, they really can change a person's life, and they might not even know it or know that it caused any damage. The real reason not to use drugs, here is an example of a scan with someone that is drug affected. Again, you can see the difference in these scans. So want to make sure that we understand, and especially educating our younger generation on what drug use can do to your brain health as well. All right, so let's look at some examples of the activity scan. So again, the healthy one, we want the red mostly down the bottom. You can see here, someone with obsessive compulsive disorder has a lot more red. So they have just too much activity going on in their brain, which is impacting how they act. And it's usually sometimes, in the front, you'll see here on the scan, the front of the brain. Same with bipolar. So you see a lot more red, a lot more activity going on. They actually call it the ring of fire because, as you can see, it has the red kind of forms a ring around the entire brain. We can get SPECT scans ourselves. So if you're interested in seeing what yours looks like, anyone can go and get it. You don't have to have any symptoms or anything like that. I know Dr. Eamon has clinics throughout the country where you can get them. I'm sure there's probably other places as well. I think his closest clinic here is New York. So what you do is you go in, you get a scan, and then you sit with a doctor and they go over in detail what the scan means. Unfortunately, I don't think insurance covers it, not 100% sure, but they probably don't, and it is quite costly. Last I checked, I believe it's around like $5,000 to get one. So it's not easily accessible to everyone, but it is out there if you were ever interested. But the good news is even without a starting point scan, what we talk about tonight, if you start implementing that, you know that your scan is improving, even if you don't have the actual picture of it. So that's what scans are, SPECT scans. And they really have changed the game in terms of talking about mental health, because even though things have gotten better, it's still out there that maybe not everyone wants to see a psychiatrist or say they're seeing one, but everyone wants a better brain. So what if mental health was really brain health? It's another way to think about it. And looking at it that way, people see the problem as medical and not moral. So what does this do? It can decrease shame and guilt that people may feel for how they're feeling and acting. It increases compliance because since everyone does want a better brain, they're more likely to do the things that they're being told they need to do. It increases forgiveness and compassion in families because, again, it may be easier for people to understand what is going on if they're looking at it from a medical lens. So SPECT scans have, like I said, really changed the game in a lot of ways, and it's really interesting what you can learn from them. So now let's jump into the 7 principles to change your brain and your life. The first one is that your brain is involved in everything you do, which is kind of what we have been talking about so far tonight, right? It's how you think, how you feel, how you act, how you interact with your friends, your family, your coworkers. It's the organ of judgment, personality, intelligence, and really every decision that you make. principle number 2 is just as simple in concept, but maybe a little more disturbing, is that when your brain works right, you work right. And when your brain is troubled, you more often than not have trouble in your life. So realizing that if you feel like that's you, it may be something happening with your brain as well. And psychologists don't always, or other doctors don't always make that connection, and they don't always look at the brain. So it's just something for you to keep in mind and to be able to be an advocate for yourself if you find yourself in a situation where you're not getting any concrete answers, that maybe it's something going on with your brain. Because it's found that a healthy brain, right, so the perfect SPEC scan here, you are more likely to be happier, healthier, wealthier, because you're making better decisions. When you make better decisions, you're often more successful too. Whereas with an unhealthy brain, you're often sadder, sicker, poorer, making poorer decisions, and therefore usually less successful. So it can be a domino effect in the wrong direction. So principle number 3 is that your brain is the most amazing organ in the universe. And here are some stats around that. There's 100 billion neurons in your brain, which is amazing. There's more connections between the neurons than there are stars. So there's a lot of connections going on up there. The brain is only 2% of your body weight, but it uses 20 to 30% of the calories that you consume each day, 20% of the oxygen, and 20% of the blood flow. So it's really the most expensive real estate in your body. It's doing a lot for such a small area. And this one I found crazy too. The storage capacity that it can hold is 6 million years of the Wall Street Journal. So it's a very impressive organ. So knowing that, we want to take care of it even more. So let's talk about what the brain kind of consists of. It's soft, it's housed in a hard skull, right? And the skull has many sharp, bony ridges. So the brain itself is the consistency of like soft butter. So if you hit, right, in your hard skull and it has the ridges, it can very easily pierce the brain because it's that soft texture. So that's how you get your brain injuries. So principle number 4, knowing how delicate it is and how we want to protect it. Because when we end up having those injuries that a lot of times go undiagnosed, we don't realize that that's what happened, it ends up being the cause of homelessness, drug and alcohol abuse, depression, panic attacks, ADHD, and unfortunately suicide as well. So as I said earlier, the brain injuries, it really can change your life, and you might not even know it. And here are some examples, because I like to kind of see real life examples. On the one on here on your left is a picture of a 15-year-old boy. So that's his scan. When he was 3 years old, he fell down the stairs and he was unconscious for about a half hour. And the doctor diagnosed it with just a mild brain injury. As you can see from the scan, it was anything but mild. So now here he is, a number of years later at 15. He had failed three different programs because of his erratic, aggressive behavior, and he wasn't able to live at home anymore because of it either. So that injury from all those years ago was really impacting his life. And then on the one on the right is the brain scan of a linebacker at a university that was arrested for domestic abuse. So you can see the damage in his brain too, contributing probably to how he was acting. So principle number 5, thinking of brain health as 3 simple strategies. So one is you want to have a good brain. You want to take the knowledge that we just talked about and understand how important your brain is to your life and your decisions and everything that you do. And you want to make sure you have the best brain possible. You want to have those healthy SPECT scans. And so we call that brain envy. And when you have brain envy, what you're going to do is you want to avoid anything that's going to harm your brain, and you want to make sure that you're engaging in habits that are going to help make your brain healthier. So I know that sounds great, but how do you implement that in practice? Like, what are the things that you should be doing and what are the things that you shouldn't be doing? So let's talk about that a little bit. So we have a mnemonic called Bright Minds as a way to think about it. And first we'll kind of go through each of these and talk about it from the lens of what we shouldn't be doing, and then we'll circle back and talk about what we can do to help each of these areas. So the B is for blood flow. Lack of blood flow is the #1 predictor actually of Alzheimer's disease. If you have high blood pressure, you're going to have less blood flow to the brain. Any type of heart disease as well will affect the blood flow. Nicotine, and unfortunately for me, caffeine as well, because I love my coffee, but caffeine also does decrease the blood flow. So we just want to make sure if we're doing any of these things, it's in moderation. Retirement and aging. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about getting older. I wish there was. But there are some things that we can do that we'll talk about in a little bit. Inflammation. We get inflammation in our body when we have low omega-3 fatty acids, so low levels of omega-3s, a lot of processed foods, unhealthy gut, and also gum disease can cause inflammation. So we want to try to reduce any inflammation in our bodies. Genetics, so we can't, again, control our genetics, unfortunately, but we should use it as a tool to know where we may have to put a little additional effort in. So if you come from a family that may be overweight, you know that you just may need to put additional effort into your diet, or in my case, having the history of Alzheimer's in my family, just making sure that I am, paying extra attention to my brain health. So looking at it not as a death sentence, but just as a wake-up call on where you may need to spend a little more time. Head trauma. Again, we want to try to avoid hitting our head so that, the skull is not hitting our brain, damaging it. So being careful of what we do. I know growing up, I always thought it was really cool when I would see people play soccer and, they would hit the soccer ball off of their head. It looked really cool to me, but come to find out, like, we really shouldn't be doing that. That's not a good thing. And also, like with football, with concussions, and so just being more aware of our actions and what we're doing. For toxins, it's mold is one, we want to stay away from that. Also things that we may put on our bodies. So I know this is a big topic nowadays with clean beauty and the different cleaning products. They're starting to try to do them without as much or any chemicals, which is great. So I try to, think about it as when you finish something before you go, buy it again, see if there's maybe a cleaner version of it, and kind of do it in baby steps, because it can be overwhelming trying to overhaul everything to get rid of the toxins in our environment. For mental health, so if you have anxiety or depression or bipolar disease, it's important that we are getting that checked and treated, because it can affect the physical functioning of our brains. Immunity and infections. So knowing that infections can interfere with your brain health as well. So an example I like to share with this is a case that I read about. It was, I believe, like a teenage girl, and she all of a sudden started acting very different. Her personality totally changed, and she was just very difficult to handle and be around. And the family took her to different doctors. They couldn't find anything wrong per se, and thought that she would just have to be placed in a treatment facility somewhere, because they didn't have the answers. And come to find out, she had Lyme disease that she had gotten from, I think, when her family went to the cabin in the woods, and it affected her brain, and that's why she was acting so differently. So once they knew that, they were able to help her. So again, just wanting all of you to know that infections can cause different personality changes and things like that. So if that happens to you or someone that you can make sure that you're checking brain health as well. Neurohormones, so you can get your hormones checked every year when you go to your doctor with your blood work. I highly recommend that, to make sure that they're in the appropriate levels, and then if not, you can work with your doctor on what you need to do to get them to where they need to be. For diabetes, so the more you weigh, the smaller your brain size gets, which I never realized. So, even more motivation to keep our weight in check. When we have also high levels of blood sugar, it can erode and damage our blood vessels, and then that leads to lower blood flow. So circling back to our first point about blood flow to the brain. And then my favorite one, sleep. It's another area I've done a lot of studies on. I like to help clients with, is getting not only quantity, but good quality sleep as well, because the brain actually cleanses itself when it's sleeping. And I always kind of had the mentality of, I'll sleep when I'm dead, plenty of time, then I'm trying to get as much into each day as possible, but that's actually not the best way to think. We actually do need our sleep, and we find that we have more energy, and our thinking will be better too when we have the appropriate amount of sleep. So let's talk about in some of these areas what we can do. So for blood flow, exercise is great to increase the blood flow to our brain. Also different foods like oregano, cayenne pepper are really good for blood flow too. Retirement and aging. So never stop learning. Learning is a great way to increase activity in our brain, and this is no matter what your age, this is great advice, is to always be learning something new. There's so many things out there, it's endless, so there's always something to learn. For inflammation, so kind of doing the opposite of what we talked about to avoid, so we want higher omega-3 fatty acids. So this is actually, you can get it in supplement form. It's a supplement that I take daily to help, because even if you're having, say, fish a few times a week, a lot of times it's not enough. So it may be a supplement you want to consider. We want to have like less processed foods in our diet. Probiotics to help with our gut health, and then making sure we floss too to help prevent gum disease. So that will help reduce the inflammation in our body. For genetics, we kind of talked about what we need to do depending on what our genetics are. Same with head trauma, staying away from certain activities. For toxins, we want to make sure that we're hydrated, so that we're flushing out the toxins through the kidneys. Also making sure we get enough fiber, so we can flush through the digestive tract as well, and also having a diet of detoxifying vegetables such as broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts are a few examples of those. So diet really does matter. For mental health, just having a positive outlook, doing gratitude journals, and just not believing everything that we say to ourselves. A lot of times we're very hard on ourselves and usually are saying things that aren't true. We call them ants, which could be a whole nother talk. It's automatic negative thoughts, so things that we automatically tell ourselves that are usually, again, not true. So for immunity and infections, I recommend making sure our vitamin D levels are within the normal range. It's not uncommon to have low levels, especially in this area where the sun seems to be missing a lot of the time, so we're not getting it from natural sources, and then also we don't necessarily want to be out basking in the sun either. So a lot of times we'll have to take a supplement. So again, you can get your levels with your blood test and work with your doctor on what you need to do to get them within the range, but that's really good for fighting infections. Neurohormones, we talked about kind of depending on what your levels are, what you may need to do. Diabetes, again, kind of circling back to the importance of diet. So we want to reduce simple carbohydrates. And it's interesting, the Mayo Clinic had done a study where people that had more of a fat-based diet, so we're talking about like more fish and healthy oils, avocado, nuts and seeds, things like that, had a 42% less risk of Alzheimer's than people that had a diet more of simple carbs. And simple carbs are the bread, the pasta, the potatoes, the rice, all the white foods. And it was found too that the people that had a diet that's mostly the simple carbs had a 400% increase in getting Alzheimer's disease. So have more of the healthy fats, less of the carbs. And then sleep, and making sure we're getting at least 7 hours of sleep a night is ideal. So I know that looking at all this can be a lot, and you're like, I don't know if I can do all of this or where to start. And really, we just need to do one step at a time. And then, add in the next thing, and then they become habits, and then over time, we're incorporating all of this into our daily life. So think of it simple. So that's principle number 6. Start with one simple strategy at a time. I'm all about simple, nothing complex. We don't want to stress ourselves out more about any of this. And I wanted to illustrate this principle with an example. So I thought it'd be really helpful, and I just love this story. This is a picture of Nancy. So Nancy lives in England, and she was 80 years old, and she found herself depressed, not a lot of energy, kind of hopeless, calling herself a couch potato. So she was kind of, that was her lifestyle, and she happened to be out one day and stumbled upon one of Dr. Amen's books and ended up picking it up and read it, and she read about the stuff that we just talked about. She's like, okay, that makes sense. But again, she knew that where she was in her life at that moment, it was going to be hard to implement all of these strategies. But she knew that she could at least do something. So that's what she did. So first, she started with hydration, making sure that she was hydrated enough. The brain is 80% water. You can have cognitive impairment with just being 2% dehydrated. So it takes very little. So we want to make sure we keep our hydration up. And so this is something that's very easy for most of us to add into our day. We don't have to change our routine very much at all to be able to drink more water. It's just being aware and making sure we get it in. So Nancy could still be a couch potato and have enough hydration, right? So it was easy for her to do. So she did that. And then her next step was some simple supplements. So maybe some of the stuff, we talked about tonight, the omega-3s, vitamin D, things like that. Again, very easy to implement into her day. She could still sit on the couch and have her water and have her supplements. It wasn't a huge change for her. But she found that she started feeling a lot better just from those two simple steps. So then she started exercising. So she's, started walking, which again is something I recommend for everyone if they're able to do. It's, great, especially if you're able to get outside, get some fresh air, and, just walk around. You can walk around the block. It doesn't have to be, miles a day. You can work up to that. So she did her walking. And then she did something that I thought was really brilliant, because I like to be efficient, get more bang for my buck. She started doing dance lessons. So she was exercising and learning something new. So she was having a 2-for-1, which was great. And then lastly, she started doing table tennis, which is a really good exercise for brain health because there's so much coordination. So you have your feet and your hands and your eyes, and you're watching the ball and stuff. So that is a really good exercise as well. So she started doing all of these different things and kept feeling better and better. So then she moved on to her diet. So she did kind of what we talked about, right? She tried to, reduce some of the carbs, get more of the healthy fats in her diet. And she did something that has been helpful for some people that's called crowding out. And so instead of thinking like you can't have something, the concept is you have all of the healthy food that you want to make sure you get into your diet first, and then you can have the other things. And so usually by the time you get to that, you're feeling full. You don't want as much or anything at all of the foods that you really don't want to be eating. So it's just like a different way to think about it that works for some people. And that's kind of what she's doing here, right? You eat the healthy foods first, so there's no room for the bad ones. And there's so many different healthy foods. Sometimes people think, oh, there's nothing I like, but there really is a lot. And Dr. Amen's wife actually has, I think, some cookbooks out that has a lot of great recipes. I'm not a big chef myself, so I haven't tried them, but they look really good if you're into cooking. So then from there, she started, continuing to learn new skills. And this is amazing. I think she learned the guitar and a couple new languages. So that is very impressive. I don't know if you've ever tried to learn another language. I know I have, and I found it very challenging. The guitar sounds challenging too. So the fact at 80 years old, she was able to learn all these new things is very impressive, inspirational for all of us. So she did that. And so what happened over a 2-year span of, slowly implementing all of this? She lost 70 pounds. And so she decided for her 82nd birthday that she was going to gift herself a SPECT scan and see what her brain looked like. So, she came over, went to one of Dr. Amen's clinics to get a scan done. So she's 82 at this point, right? This is what scans usually look like for someone between 80 and 90 years old, okay? So we can see, they don't look like the total healthy version that we had seen earlier, right? This was Nancy's scan. So it looked amazing. And she actually looked like around a 40-year-old. So, and again, like I mentioned earlier, with not having your starting scan, Nancy said, I don't have, what my scan looked like 2 years ago, but I could tell you that it didn't, look like that. She was confident in, that what she had done over the 2 years had really improved her scan. So if Nancy can do this in her 80s, we all can do it too. And again, just doing one simple step at a time. That was her strategy, and it worked. So I love Nancy. I think I'd love to meet her. I think she has a great story. So the last principle is you can change your brain and your life. You're not stuck with the brain you have, which I think just gives us so much hope, right? It's not, we know that we can make positive improvements. It's not like, like we're stuck with where we are now. And to give you an example, I wanted to talk about the NFL. So in 1994, the NFL formed a concussion committee. Got this here? Okay. But instead of studying the players, they studied rats instead, which wasn't very helpful to the purpose. And I'll spare the details of what they did to the poor little rats, but what happened in 2009, so all those years later, from 1994 to 2009, Goodell said to Congress that the NFL didn't know if playing football caused long-term brain damage. They were still studying the issue. So what is the problem with what they were doing? They didn't seem to want to admit that they had a problem, right? And so if you don't admit it, there's nothing you can do to solve it. So what was happening is players were leaving the league that did have brain damage, and they were leaving without any help and not a lot of hope. But in 2009, the Amen Clinics teamed up with the NFL Players Association. And they did the first and largest imaging study on players. So they did the SPECT scans on the players. And it really changed everything in what they were able to find. So the first 100 scans that they did for the players, they all had brain damage, which is not surprising, right, given what these guys were doing for work. It was expected. But what was really remarkable is that once they were on the program and implementing the things that we were talking about tonight, within a couple months, 80% of them saw improvements. So it really did help them, and it helped their sleep, their mood, lowering their anxiety. So it was a lot of positives that came out of that study. And it showed that it is never too late to make improvements, and you're not stuck with where you are now, because these guys all had damage that was obvious on the SPECT scans, and they were able to make improvements. All right, so I know that was a lot of information, so wanted to quickly do a summary of the 7 principles once again. So one was that your brain is involved in everything you do, right? It's in your decisions, how you interact with people, your thoughts, your feelings. Your brain basically touches everything in your life. And when your brain works right, you work right. If your brain is troubled, you're more likely to have troubles in your life as well. And then your brain is the most amazing organ in the universe, so remembering everything that is going on up there in such a small space, and how much of the resources it uses in our body. And knowing that our brain is soft, right? It's not hard like our skull, and it's very easily damaged. Brain health is 3 simple strategies, right? We want to have brain envy. We want those good scans. And because we're envious, we're going to do more of the things that are good for our brain. Avoid the things that are not. And remembering the bright minds as a way to remember each of those pieces. And then we are going to start with one strategy at a time, right? We're going to keep it simple, work through, one of them, get it to be a habit, and then go on to the next one. And then knowing that at any time you can change your brain in your life, you're not stuck with the brain that you have now, if it's not the one you want. So circling back to the goals that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation, I want to make sure that I met them all for you. One was how brains run the world. So we walked through some examples, hopefully gave you a new way of thinking about how much brains are involved in everything in our life. SPECT scans, so hopefully now you know what a SPECT scan is, what it tells us, what it looks like, what we want ours to look like. And then we talked about the different 7 principles to know that can change your brain and your life if you implement them. Okay, so ways to stay in touch with me. If you have any questions, you need any additional resources, I am always here for everyone. So I think at this point, I'm pretty much on every social media platform that there is. Try to keep my name consistent at Cherie Tripp, so hopefully you'll be able to find me on your platform of choice. I am there. My website is cherietripp.com. On there I'm always posting new blogs with different brain health topics, also stress reduction and sleep. Those are kind of my 3 passion areas. There's also some recipes and different things on there as well. So I'd love for you to take a peruse through my website at any time. And then if you're more of an email person, cheriehealthcoach@gmail.com. And that is the end of the presentation. So thank you, everyone, for watching through till the end. I hope you learned something new and you can start implementing something tonight. And here's to great brain health going forward. So thank you so much.
Hello, I'm Judy Weinthaler, and I'm on the board of the Hopkinton Emergency Fund. We're a 501c3 to help people with financial emergencies. We're asking your support and help in spreading the word, and be in touch if we can provide more information. In conjunction with the Hopkinton Women's Club, we are doing, yes, one more golf tournament.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Dinsmore. I am the founder and president of the Hopkinton Freedom Team. What we do is offer a safe and confidential space for anyone who has experienced any sort of bias. If you have any questions or want further information, you can reach us at our website at hopkintonfreedomteam.org. And we have our third annual Pride event happening June 11th. We're collaborating with the Hopkinton Center for the Arts and the Hopkinton Youth and Family Services.
I'm John Palmer. I'm here with the Hopkinton Historical Society. We're located on 168 Hayden Row Street.
Did you know only 34% of children are highly resilient? That means 66% of kids aren't able to cope with and quickly overcome challenges. These findings come from the Cigna Resilience Index, the largest U.S. survey on resilience. Unfortunately, challenges facing children are on the rise. From academics to sports to social pressures, our kids are facing adversity at an alarming rate. For example, social media has changed the way children communicate. This can negatively impact children's confidence and perceptions of themselves. That's why raising a resilient kid is more important than ever. The MRP Project's Raising Resilient Kids program is for parents who want to ensure their child can positively and productively overcome life's obstacles. The series lays the foundation for resilience by arming parents with the tools needed to help kids cope with adversity.
In the 6-week series, we'll highlight the essential role obstacles play in children's development. The facilitators discourage parents from trying to fix problems. Instead, we discuss specific behaviors, thoughts, and actions to help children work through specific situations. We'll provide strategies that can be used to help deal with similar situations in the future. We also spend time during the first couple of sessions discussing ourselves and our own resilience. This is an important aspect to our curriculum, as it is critical for us as parents to be resilient. We can't expect our children to be resilient unless we're modeling resilient behaviors for them. Each class focuses on one topic, and the facilitators provide time for problem solving and group discussions. Participants can support each other, share lessons learned, discuss experiences, and learn from one another.
One of our recent participants said, and I quote, "Raising Resilient Kids was a wonderful series that I am so happy I had the opportunity to participate in. Through this series, I gained new strategies to work with my own children through situations that in the past have felt overwhelming to me. I walked away from this series with new language to use with my children and to help guide them through situations they may encounter in everyday life growing up. I am truly grateful for the discussions, encouragement, and guidance that this series provided. I'd encourage any parent to participate in the MRP's Raising Resilient Kids. If you want to sign up, please visit the mrpproject.org/raisingresilientkids.
The Sustainable Green Committee is a group of 15 people working hard to help Hopkinton address the serious environmental issues facing us. We develop plans and practical solutions to help save not only our special slice of the planet, but also help save residents, businesses, and municipal organizations money. Double green power. This includes a municipal aggregation plan, so our electricity comes from green supplies, a climate action plan to help us meet the state's net zero carbon emissions target, and so much more. We also provide useful information on green topics. Our website, hopgreen.org, aims to be a one-stop spot for links to some of the best resources out there on solar, EVs, waste reduction, heating, and safe natural resource management. Our social media and email lists help to keep anyone who wants to be informed about everything we're doing, as well as the latest green news. We're always looking for help, so contact us if you'd like to work on this important mission. Thank you.
Solar power is a free gift from the universe. You'll be very surprised at how many programs there are that offer rebates and information for you to save money on your business and your home. You owe it to yourself to find out more information. Go to the website www.mass.gov/solar-information-programs. Many businesses around town are already taking advantage of solar power. Ask your neighbors what they think. You're saving money and you're saving the planet. Life doesn't get more simple than that.
I'm John Palmer. I'm here with the Hopkinton Historical Society. We're located on 168 Hayden Row Street.